All right, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll, and then I'll just pass it right over to Courtney to go through the agenda.
Agent,
Here.
Clegg,
Here.
Halliburton,
Here.
Sanchez, Thompson,
Here.
Woodings.
Here.
5 present, 1 absent.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, good morning and welcome to the last city council meeting and work session of the year. This is a strategic planning session. So we're bringing to you the topics either you've asked me to follow up on or I thought you might be interested in. So we're going to start with staff introductions of some new staff members who we hope you interact with in the coming months. Second, we'll go over the interim budget changes and the end of year proposed expenditures. Then we'll talk about language access. Then we'll do the Clean City Index. And then we'll do a housing update focused on the projects we currently have underway. And then originally in our planning, we anticipated an executive session, but that item has been pulled. So there's a little more time in case you want to dive deeper into any of these topics. And so with that, I'll ask Kate Nelson to come up and introduce herself.
Good morning, Madam Mayor and council members. It is so nice to be in front of, closer? Yeah. Okay. Well, good morning. It's very nice to be in front of you. I was trying to think of a few things that you might not know about my work history. So I will share that after graduate school, I went to University of Idaho and worked in special education before switching to work in entrepreneurship, which included supply chain management, international sales, and a fantastic array of opportunities that only a very small business started up in Boise, Idaho can provide. It was during that time I began volunteering in the Boise community and was really drawn to focusing my efforts in the nonprofit sector. And I found a home at Janus for just about 10 years. I joined them in early 2012, where I worked on anti-poverty efforts that included microlending, childcare development, entrepreneurship, and youth leadership. As you can see, I've had a very diverse background, and I'm really excited and looking forward to applying that array of experience in my role as Director of Community Partnerships. It is a role I feel very, very privileged and excited to step into. I've now been here for 6 weeks and extremely excited about the people that I've connected with at the city and the work that I've been able to do so far, which very high level has included connecting with partnerships. We are very fortunate to be in a community that cares and is so engaged. So I've been meeting with a number of nonprofits, about 24 so far, and as well as constituents and listening to their concerns, especially in relation to the application of ARPA funds. So that is one of my primary areas of focus at this time, specifically the external applications of where the city is going to devote funds. And in addition to ARPA and the external engagement, the other piece is childcare, where I'm charged with advancing the task force's recommendation, examining where we as a city can help alleviate some of the burden that is felt by the childcare crisis here in Boise, and we know exists across the country. So with that, I'll stand for any questions at this time. Thank you so much. Oh,
Madam Mayor.
yes.
Some of us have been blessed to know Kate for well over 20 years. And for those of you who haven't, she just dramatically undersold her talents and abilities and her skills. And we're very, very lucky to have you here.
Madam Mayor, one of the items that Kate did not mention that is on her resume is I met Kate when she very generously joined our advisory board for Energize Our Neighborhoods some years back. So that's when I got to know Kate. She has so much care for our community, so many amazing connections that she brings to our city. So thank you so much for taking on this task, Kate.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kate.
Madam Mayor.
Maybe not.
Kate, I was just going to say, welcome aboard. And it's really great to have someone with your breadth of skills in this position, because this is a position that really is a generalist position. And that breadth, I think, will serve you and the city really well. So welcome.
Thank you so much.
Don, do you want to come up?
Hello, good morning, everyone. So my name is Adon Galindo. I'm the new strategic real estate manager for the city. Prior to this, I come from the private sector, where I worked at Albertsons for the past 5 years, working on corporate and real estate strategy and basically, facilitating, negotiating, and executing transactions, large and small for them. Small as $30,000 for a store, all the way up to a couple $2 billion in sale leasebacks. Prior to that, I was in commercial real estate as a broker in San Francisco, working with companies and finding office, representing landlords, and helping tenants get in those offices and investment sales. And prior to that, I was doing multifamily. So on the property level, doing leasing, and then rose up to do asset management. So I have a full spectrum of experience, and really look forward to bringing that to the city, really professionalizing the real estate and focusing on what data we can get and make informed decisions. Thank you. Any questions?
Well, I've been asking for a real estate specialist, so be expecting a phone call or two.
Great.
Madam Mayor.
Yeah, and I would say that is true. You were here because Council President Clegg, for many years, has asked for a real estate specialist, and we did it this year.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What'd I miss? So sorry. But dibs too. I'd like to talk to you too at some point. So Lisa Sanchez, renter, and would love to chat about the growing number of renters we have in our community.
Great.
And welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Justin, do you want to come up?
Good morning, Mayor McLean, members of council. Honored to officially introduce myself today. I'm Justin Core Communications Director and Mayor's Press Secretary. Moved to the area in 1990, take no credit for this smart decision. It was done by my parents. I was 11. But as I grew up going to middle and high school here and at Boise State University, I saw how thousands of people were learning what my parents had learned when I was young, that Boise is the most special place in America. Worked for 14 years right down the road at KTVB, sharing this community's stories that I thought were truly making a difference. 6 years ago, I took a job opportunity out of state in the Ozarks, and while the Ozarks had some good people, as you might expect, it is most definitely not Boise, Idaho. When my contract was up pause for laughter, thank you. When my contract was up 3 years ago, I received opportunities from West Texas, Southern Illinois, and Eastern Washington, which are also very much not Boise, Idaho. My wife and I realized what my parents did decades ago, that Boise is the best place on the planet to live, work, and raise a family, that it truly is a city for everyone. We moved back, her with a job, me not so much. I eventually found one, worked in PR for 3 years, and when I saw this opportunity, I truly considered it a dream job. And even though I've worked here 2 months, I still do. Courtney Washburn called and said they were going to make an offer on this position. And I said, to whom? She said, after some silence, second guessing herself, to me. And it has been a true honor. Telling the stories of this community, of this city, of this staff, of the people of Boise, and again, making a difference. In my brief time here, I've seen a true, legitimate, and genuine passion from the mayor, from everyone on this council, from everyone in this building, who talks the talk and walks the walk. That they are doing the work, that they want to make the city even more a city for everyone. It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much. And I stand for questions.
Madam Mayor, I had the opportunity to pinch hit for the mayor at a ULI event several weeks ago, and Justin sent me amazing preparation. I was very pleased. He has a way with words and he has a way with telling our story in a way that's going to connect with audiences. So I appreciate your work so far, Justin, and I look forward to continuing to work with you.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Welcome, Justin. I've had the opportunity to do a couple of things in terms of press and other events. And I just would encourage you to reach out to these other council members. They're, as you noted, very passionate, very skilled. Everyone has a particular interest, and I think we can do a good job representing the city. Your skills are clearly going to be helpful in that. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Justin.
Tiffany?
Madam Mayor and City Council members, good morning. My name is Tiffany Brogy McCree. I am the new Energize Our Neighborhoods Program Manager. Just like Justin's sentiment, I came to Boise State probably about 11 years ago and graduated, got a position back in Southern California where I'm from, and decided that wasn't the place for me. I was in public relations where I specialized in energy, land use, and local government. Moved back to Idaho, where I have been the communications manager for public works at the city of Nampa. This transition has been seamless, and I'm super grateful for this opportunity. And over these past few weeks, I've had the opportunity to meet with several neighborhood associations and see what their priorities are and how we can help better support them in the future. So thank you. I will stand for any questions.
Madam Mayor. Tiffany, I just want to say welcome to the team. When I think of the city's team, I do think of our neighbors and our neighborhood associations. And I remember that was kind of one of my first introductions to getting involved in the city. I know that several other of our council members, that was the same way. And I oftentimes think of our neighborhoods and our neighborhood associations as our greatest untapped potential. So it's exciting to have somebody in a role that can really bring them in and help them make our city better and feel like they're part of the team as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, thank you so much, Tiffany, for taking on this role as the former co-chair of Energize Our Neighborhoods before it was reimagined in the Office of Community Engagement. It's really great to see that this work is continuing. We have so many special people who are passionate about their neighborhoods throughout the city. And I think it'll be great to have your skills in helping them turn that passion into positive action on behalf of their neighborhoods and preserving all of the special characteristics of the place where they live. So thank you so much. I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, welcome. I'll echo what the others have said about the importance of this position and add sort of an echo of what I said to Kate, which is that our neighborhoods are really varied. They need someone who can respond to all kinds of different issues and needs. And I look forward to working with you. It sounds like your experience will serve that well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor. Thank you. Welcome, Tiffany. Thank you so much for joining us. If I could make one little request, something I've learned over the last 4 years is there is this bifurcation between property owners and renters, at least from some of the folks that we've heard come testify here before us. And if there's anything you can do to help people recognize, neighborhood associations recognize that renters are also part of our community and they have something particular to offer, I think that's a culture shift that I'm hoping that we will start to embrace. So any little bit you can do to get folks to understand that, I would greatly appreciate. Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, council members, now we'll go into the interim budget changes. I just wanted, before we get into the details, to highlight a couple of the trends that are happening in regards to our budget. Also, Eric will be prepared to go over the details, and we have the relevant city staff to answer any questions you may have. But I'm sure, as you're all aware, The city is facing more uncertainty in terms of supply chains and also increases in construction costs, which has led to some disruption and some need for us to readdress some of our projects. The city, as every employer is currently doing, is struggling with labor shortages. And then I think new challenges in retention. I think the impact of COVID on the workforce has people making different life choices. Also, it's highly competitive. So in some cases, even when we're able to recruit staff, they are quickly stolen by someone else who appreciates their talents. So our vacancy rate and our retention approaches and recruitment approaches are fluctuating in order to stay competitive in the current labor market. Also, the projects are becoming more complex, and that's intentional. We have had a lot of discussions, and I have heard your desire to do what we often refer to as stacking benefits. So if we want each project to be our best project, where we need to ensure or at least consider an economic development component, a transportation aspect, a clean energy aspect, and affordable housing, stacking those projects has made the need for project management more urgent and more sophisticated than perhaps some of the city's projects in the past. A good example is what we'd like to do at Fire Station 5. No longer can we rely on fire to both design and build a fire station, do the additive affordable housing component, negotiate the support from CCDC, and those are just a couple of the complicated factors associated with the projects. We will address the complication, but I just wanted to make you aware that to get all the benefits into these projects we're looking for, we need more sophisticated project management. And then lastly, and we appreciate your support in this area, we need to maintain our ability to be nimble and ready to respond to the community's needs, which are changing. And the stability, I think, that we all once found comfort in is no longer part of the equation, particularly as we move to provide the best services the city can to the most number of people. And with that, I just want to do an overview of the IBC you have. Half of it is a request for FTEs. The first two items are with the enterprise funds. The airport is growing at a rapid pace, and with the passage of the water renewal bond, they are in need of additional staff to support that effort. There are general fund FTEs, and then the latter part of the IBC are the end of year allocations. And with that, I'll turn it over to Eric to go through the details.
Good morning, Madam Mayor, members of the council. As Courtney mentioned, we have a number of budgetary adjustments for your consideration this morning. I'm going to break them apart. First, talk about the general fund positions, and we'll go into, the non-general fund positions. We'll go into the general fund. We have some non-personnel related changes, and then we have our end of year
Could you
adjustments.
speak up just a little bit? Thank you. Sorry.
Thanks.
I'd be remiss to point out that we are going to fix the sound system, which is why it's in the IBC. This is driving everyone crazy.
Thank you. So looking at position adjustments in other funds apart from the general fund, as Courtney mentioned, there is a recommendation in the airport fund for project management support. As we look at the number of projects being added and that the airport is aiming to deliver, project management support has been an increasing need. You could look at parking garages, concourse development, and so on and so forth. Within Public Works, there is a recommendation for 7 positions to support primarily the Water Renewal Fund. With the passage of the bond last month, as well as the adoption of the Water Renewal Utility Plan last fiscal year, there is some increasing needs out there. Those positions include an industrial electrician, a project manager, 2 wastewater process analysts, an administrative support coordinator, as well as 2 revenue analysts. And finally, in the non-general fund section, we have a recommendation to add 1 fleet mechanic to the Department of Finance and Administration. That mechanic position will aid the department in keeping up with proactive maintenance needs, as well as with growth within the organization.
Madam Mayor. Thanks. Should we have questions as we go along? Should we wait till the end? I don't care which.
Go through.
Okay, just a question about the public works positions, not a specific one, but just as a larger ongoing question. So obviously during the budget process this year, we approved, I think, another 7 positions in public works. They were mostly lower level as I looked them up. These are more the manager ones. They were dependent on the passage of the bond in part, which is why they're coming forward now. So my longer term question is, as we look at the budget next year and look at the vacancies that we've had for, over this year and adding all these new FTEs, will we be doing some kind of a look at a balancing process to make sure that we're in the right place in terms of the number of staffing and the amount of work? And I know that may be hard to answer because we're so short-staffed at the moment, but I'm just wondering how that's going to work next year.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, Public Works is currently in the process of doing a staffing study, which is looking at our entire department, water renewal fund, and all of our other funds to determine what our staffing levels need to be. So I think that will end out answering your question with the water renewal utility plan and the bond work. It's right now, we know that there are certain positions that we're kind of terming as no regrets hires, which we know we need right now. So we'll be looking at the organizational structure of especially water renewal fund, but as I mentioned, the other funds to be sure that we're getting that right level, looking at what our vacancy rates are, do we need to have a different organizational structure to move forward and really position the utility for a longer term.
Okay, great. Thanks. Just involve us in that as those numbers come forward and as you're thinking about it.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'll move now to positions recommended within the general fund. The first position is within the library. It is for a mental health coordinator. Staff at the library interact daily with community members experiencing mental health crisis. This position will provide direct support to those community members, as well as maybe ease burden on other departments across the organization, and also serve as a single point of contact for social service providers. So as they're interacting with the library in ways to service those community members, they'll have one point of contact.
Madam Mayor, I just want to highlight that position. When Jessica Dorr told me about that, I squealed. I think this is an example of the city recognizing the role that it plays in the community. And I really commend folks for creating this position, for recognizing the value of our library, and that it plays a larger, more significant role than I think many members of our community do not appreciate, because they don't need that service, but there's a great number of our community members who do. And I am so excited to see this position move forward.
Madam Mayor, I think since we're stopped here and Jessica came up, I had some questions. This is the first I have heard of it is through this interim budget change. So I would love to know a little bit more about how this, because this is a fairly big departure from the way that we provided service in the past. So I'm kind of curious, what is the chain of command? How will this person interact with social services? How will this person get folks the additional resources that they need and just kind of interact with the library system in general?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, thank you for the great questions, Councilmember Woodings. I'll start with some context. This is a position that we're requesting because we are not meeting a current community need in our buildings. Eric alluded to it. We right now are seeing people who are coming to us. We are a safe, trusted institution, and people who are coming daily to my staff saying, I've lost my job. I won't be able to make rent this week. Can you help? I am trying to apply for Social Security. Did I do it right? The entry into social services is often new and scary for people. And the library is asked on a daily basis to help people navigate social services. We know right now we're not equipped to meet those needs. Asking for a mental health coordinator can help us be more effective, both in the day-to-day needs, but then to your point about how do we make sure we're coordinating better with our social safety net so that we are able to provide that information and scale it across our organization in a way that we currently cannot do. Having a single point of contact for Catch, for Jesse Tree, for some of our key community partners is going to allow us to work with them more effectively and to help people in early interventions. The chain of command question, we actually looked at different models for how to bring this resource into the library. We thought about adding somebody, the BPD has a mental health position as well. Should we ask one of those staff person to join us? We thought about outsourcing it as well, but to the point of we need to make sure that this position understands the role of the library and understands library resources and can work with our staff effectively. That's why we decided that it really made sense after talking with BPD and looking at their model and looking at other library systems across the country that have done this. This is the recommendation that we have for what makes sense for us here in Boise.
Madam Mayor, just one follow-up. Thank you so much for that context. I really appreciate it. I think what I heard was this is more of a social services coordinator than, because when I saw mental health coordinator, I was thinking, oh my gosh, there are people in the libraries who are having mental health crises and we need somebody to intervene.
Yes.
So is it that too?
It is that too. Okay. And quite frankly, it's very unsatisfying when someone walks in and says, I don't have a reason to live. Can you help me? And my staff, our option right now is to hand somebody the number for the suicide hotline or to call 911. That's not meeting people's needs. We know that there's a model that exists that actually can help train our staff and allows people to set up, one-on-one time with someone who can really help them enter into a social safety net in a way that we know people that need that long-term support. We also deal with a lot of people who don't have a phone. And actually then a caseworker can't get a hold of them because their phone's been turned off. They're not able to authenticate their email because they can't, their phone's been turned off. So they're having somebody who can, help navigate in a much more in-depth way will keep those crises. That early prevention will really help make sure that when we do have a true crisis, we're already tapped into the fabric of Boise that can help those people.
Madam Mayor, that's wonderful, Jessica. I think that librarians are superheroes anyway. It sounds like you found a way to add another superhero to your squad in a way that our citizens need. So I really appreciate you sharing that and giving us that context and sharing with us what the need is. Much appreciated.
Madam Mayor, two quick questions. First of all, I highly approve of this position and you did a great job describing how important it is and how it'll serve our community. Will this, first one's just really easy. Will this position be centered at the main library and will be able to go around or where will they be located?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Thompson, we anticipate that this position will have sort of a landing spot at the downtown location, but absolutely will travel. And one of the things that we will work with is ask, the person to identify a good schedule for that that's predictable. Because while we see the most critical need at the downtown location, we're absolutely seeing the same need in all our locations as well.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, one last question. It makes total sense for this to be centered within the library system. But can this position also assist if, say, someone had those similar comments from the utility billing line or something? Can it serve the greater city? I think it makes sense to be at the library. That's probably 95%, but there might be other instances where an individual enters City Hall and asks a receptionist something similar. I don't know, but can they be directed to that individual as well?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Thompson, I love that idea. I think part of what would be great is having this position sit at the table with other similar city departments and people in the same role, and to really assess how do we make sure that we are effective for everyone, and that, one city, you come in, and if you are in crisis, we should be able to very quickly identify how someone can be supported. I think that's a great suggestion for the position to consider.
Thank you. It sounds from this conversation like there is general support for this, but some questions about how it's all going to work. I wonder if we approve this today, if we could have some follow-up and a discussion about that, because I think a lot of us are really excited about the prospect. I know I am, and have some similar questions. Is that a way forward, maybe? Yeah.
Thank you.
The next proposed adjustment would be the addition of a management assistant within the Human Resources Department. The goal of this position would be to free up staff, oftentimes senior level staff within the department, to focus on both the day-to-day operations of the department as well as strategic leadership issues. One of the things that the department has been encountering recently has been, the extreme level of vacancies across the organization. We were looking at this morning. Currently, there's approximately 160 plus vacancies across the organization. Compare that to 12 months ago, where it was about 120. So we were seeing high vacancy levels. HR staff is working to, help departments in filling those vacancies, but is also doing a heavy amount of administrative work for this position.
Just a quick question about that. So do we know those vacancies, are those people how many of those are people who've left? How many of those are positions that we need that have not been filled? Do we know that?
Council member, what I can say is that on average, on a week by week basis, the number of vacancies has been either flat or going up, which would indicate that we're seeing, people exiting the organization. At the same time, as part of the fiscal year 22 budget build, there were a number of new positions that the city council approved. So it's almost dueling challenges of retention as well as onboarding additional staff.
I remember at one point we asked if there was exit interviews happening to determine what is actually causing people to leave the organization. Do we know if that's happening or what the results of that are?
Madam Mayor, Council Pro Tem, we are doing exit interviews and expanded. I think what we might want to do is bring you back the whole picture of vacancy rates, how we're recruiting, what the retention issues are, and what we're doing to address those, if you're interested in a full picture, so you're not just getting pieces of it.
Yeah, that would be great. But yeah, if you want to speak to it as well, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, so I think Courtney's suggestion is a good one. It's a complex web and we just want to make sure we represent it well. But yes, we are doing exit interviews and we can come back with just a more robust picture of all of that.
Madam Mayor, I appreciate the kind of context around why we would be adding this position in this particular time. One of the things that concerns me is that we're adding a lot of positions on an ongoing basis. And so I would ask if at some point in the future, if staffing levels become stabilized, if we don't have this huge lift from human resources, that we look at that again and figure out, I'm not advocating firing anyone based on our needs, but as there is natural attrition and things like that, making sure that the HR department is the right size for our needs at the time.
Yeah, and let me just chime in that just as an awareness. So the HR department's the only department that doesn't have a chief administrative officer or a dedicated admin. So there's sort of no one to turn to do just the basic stuff. And as you know, we've just got a whole lot going on. So asking senior managers to do their own admin just is not a good use of time or money. So this one is that's why we're bringing it here. Yeah.
Makes sense. Thank you.
The next adjustment is for 2 position uplifts within the Arts and History Department, making a 0.75 position program outreach assistant into a full-time position and a 0.5 administrative assistant into a full-time position. These 2 adjustments are aimed to address increasing workloads as well as improve citizen engagement. Also to position an incoming director in the earlier portion of the calendar year for continued success in that department.
Madam Mayor. Sorry, I guess I just have lots of comments. I was very excited to see these positions being promoted to full-time. And I think it also speaks to the approach that Arts and History has had throughout the years of being very conscientious with the resources that they have in making sure that they have staff doing the tasks that they need them to do. But this really reflects that they need more time to do those things. We have the most robust arts, culture, and history department that we've ever had. Thank you to Terry Shorsman for that. And I think that this does definitely set the new director when they're hired up for better success. So thank you so much for bringing this. I think it's been needed for a long time.
Madam Mayor. I think this position is really indicative of kind of where we are as a city. We started the Arts and History Department with very little staff. It's probably been understaffed its entire life, and we're now, growing up as you do, and recognize the need to step up the game in these and other places. So I think, as I look at these overall, that's sort of where we are. We've tried really hard to maintain the staffing levels that we had as a smaller city, and we're now a larger city, and we're struggling with how to get there. So look forward over this process and the next budget year to really digging into that.
Madam Mayor, thank you. I'm happy to see that that this department is going to get some much needed help in this area. What is not reflected when we look at the title Arts and History is the fact that this department, along with BPD, have been leaders when it comes to the work of diversity, equity, inclusion for the city. They've really taken the initiative to be the ones to highlight that in their work. And Terry has been a wonderful resource on the DEI steering committee that we started in 2020. And so just to point that out and to recognize that, at times I think departments like this are minimized and are viewed as being fluffy and fun. And this could not be further from the truth. This department has done very important, vital, cutting edge work to bring forward the best parts of our community and to bring them together and to transform us as an organization. So Terry, under your leadership, thank you so much for bringing forward DEI at the City of Boise through arts and history.
Thank you very much. The last category within the general fund of position adjustments is for project management, as Courtney prefaced this discussion with. This recommendation would be for one new project management resource within the Public Works Department, as well as 2 within the Office of the Mayor. As outlined on the slide, the recommendation here allows for the advancement of some key citywide strategic initiatives. We can talk about housing, ADA improvements, which we'll talk about a little bit more as this presentation goes on, city facilities, fire stations, neighborhood improvement program. There's a variety of different citywide or enterprise wide projects that these positions will help support. In particular, they will help support complex projects that span multiple departments. In evaluating this request, the addition of permanent project management support compares favorably to contractors. As part of the fiscal year 22 adopted budget, the City Council did approve some one-time resources in the mayor's office for project management support. It's very difficult in this environment to recruit people to accept temporary positions at that level. I'll note that there is a strong likelihood that these positions will be able to charge off their time to existing already budgeted projects. So if you think about those capital project areas that I referenced just a moment ago, many of those already have allocations in place. So the idea is that these positions should be able to charge off a portion of their time to those areas, as well as potentially to ARPA projects once those are fully identified.
Madam Mayor, I think that this IVC was the one that got my attention in the most dramatic way. And I do remember allocating resources for contractors as one-time resources. And I thought that was smart. I understand that it was not possible to hire contractors. But I think that this conversation is a lot different than allocating one-time funds for contractors. These are 3 full-time positions that will be on our books for years to come. And this increases our annual budget. I'm going to remind everyone we're still in the first quarter of the fiscal year by $375,000. And that's not chump change. That's a lot of money. And so I think that what I would have liked to have seen here was, okay, we approved funding for contractors that has an end date. What are our needs ongoing for permanent project managers? Is it 3? I don't really know. I mean, I haven't seen, we have some kind of top level projects that they could take on. We're not really provided with a lot of information on what those projects will be and if we need 3 project managers to do those. So this is the piece that I'm least comfortable with. And I think we should really be keeping track of our additions of full-time staff and how that impacts our city budget going forward. It's something I'm really going to be looking at and keeping track of. And because these are ongoing expenses. These come straight out of our bottom line, straight out of the general fund. And I want to be really conscientious of that going forward.
Councilmember, one thing I might reference in relation to your concern is that we're about a month away from having our fiscal year 23 through 27 general fund forecast, which we'll be bringing forward for city council review. One element of the last forecast that we did as part of the fiscal year 22 budget is we had included an assumption that on an annual basis there would be a need for additional staff across the organization. That assumption was approximately $750,000 or an allowance within our forecast for that. I don't have any reason at this point in time to think that our forecast will be any less favorable than the prior forecast. Certainly some challenges to work through. But I don't see it going in a downward reduction type situation. So as you look at this 375,000, I think a portion of it could be charged off to existing already approved budgetary allocations. Secondly, that $750,000 allocation may need to be reduced going into the fiscal year 23 build as a result of this. But I think that we did allow for some level of ongoing resources beyond what was already approved.
Thanks, Eric. I just want to remind everyone that we had a pretty large headcount increase as part of our fiscal year budget for this year too. So just keeping all of those things in mind, I think would be beneficial going forward.
Madam Mayor, if I might offer some background on how we got here. When we check in with the executive management team, which is made up of the directors of all our departments on the portfolio management tool, which shows us how many projects is a city of a certain size. So it's over about $25,000 in staff time or in cash are started or in progress or have been executed. It was clear we have some challenges in the execution part of our state phase of projects. And our staff, in order to accommodate all the needs, tends to add more and more projects onto their plates, pushing the execution further and further back. And so it was a discussion with that team about how to bring some of these projects to a close to make room for other issues. And so we talked about, is it project management we need? Is it prioritization we need? Like, what is it do we need to solve the issue of execution? So we don't do everything all the time, slowing the portfolio projects down. So just in terms of background, that's where the need was identified from the departments, that if there was some person in a position whose day-to-day was just moving some of these projects forward, particularly when they involve multiple departments, that was a need identified through the portfolio management tool. I just offered that as background.
Madam Mayor, I'm glad to hear that prioritization was part of that conversation, because I think that we do have a lot going on. I know that everyone's being pulled from multiple directions, and there's no way to get everything done at the same speed, like that's just the reality that we live in. So I'm glad that prioritization was a piece of that. In thinking about this a little bit further, I also understand the need for cross-departmental collaboration. And I know that all of these things have been housed in the mayor's office in the past, but I'm wondering if, as we have more strategic priorities, if there might be, and this isn't something I want to happen today, but just kind of starting the conversation, if there might be like a department of strategic initiatives that not only answer to the mayor, but also answer to council in these big cross-departmental strategic initiatives that we're taking on. We have a lot going on with climate, with housing, with broadband, with federal funding coming in. So that might be a conversation that we want to have going forward.
Madam Mayor. Yes. I get it. I trust the EMT pretty implicitly. There's almost $7 million in budgetary changes and 14 new positions with a memo that we got Friday and 15 minutes allocated in the meeting. My problem, I think, is similar to Councilmember Wooding's. I just have to trust that these are the right things. I don't have enough information. I don't understand what's going on. We do a lot of business by interim budget change, and I rarely feel that I have the context to competently make the decision. And so then I just trust that these kinds of detailed conversations have happened. We don't have time to really explore and ask and learn and understand each item. And it makes it very challenging. And I feel very challenged here because I'm just going to have to take everybody's word for it that these are the right things to do. I have not been given an opportunity or had a chance to really understand what's happening here. And they are big changes, especially the permanent full-time employees. So I want to raise that because we'd said a couple of meetings ago that I had ideas for how we can work better as a mayor and council and city. And this is certainly kind of in that lane. I don't know how I can competently go to the public and say, here's what we're doing, here's why I understand it. And I don't feel that we've been given the time or the opportunity to allow me to do that work.
Madam Mayor, it's not surprising to me that 2 years into a new administration and a relatively new council, we're bumping into some things process-wise that we just haven't run into before. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to figure out the process forward to make sure that everyone feels like they have their opportunity to ask and answer questions. I understand that we're at a point process-wise where, because of the fiscal year ending and all of those, we have a bit of a time crunch today to consider these things that are before us. So I guess I would suggest that we, and I'm suggesting this to my fellow council members, that given the information we have been given today, that we do trust that this is something that's been looked into pretty heavily by the staff. And yet we also ask that if we approve this today, we get a presentation on the 11th that digs into some of those questions, not to pull that approval back, but to offer direction on how it will go forward. I think there's a basic outline here. I think it's strong. I think I've heard some discussion today that offers maybe some additional suggestions for details of how it will go forward. And I certainly think there's opportunity to have a discussion about that detail, and so that everybody feels comfortable that this is the right direction. And then, as I stated earlier, I think, again, maturation process of a smaller city becoming a bigger city and figuring out what does that mean in terms of really understanding the staffing structure and the numbers, and how do you control that, and to what extent do you control that? I've watched over the years as, for instance, the Idaho Transportation Department has been completely handcuffed by the legislature in terms of the number of internal FTEs they have, and responding to that by hiring any number of contractors externally, which over time really wasn't the most efficient way for them to work, and figuring that out after the fact. I've watched another department higher up and in places where State Department that they probably could have done contractors. So it's not from my experience, from my observation, it's not an easy metric or easy answer to come to, but but is one that deserves, I think, deep discussion. I think we've started that today. I feel comfortable we have.
Madam Mayor.
That didn't sound like you at all this time.
I think I like coughed and I think
There were two of
Councilmember
us.
Bajan said something at the same time, so I think there was an echo going on. First, I really appreciate the points that my fellow council members have already brought up, and especially Council President Clegg for the voice of reason there, and helping us create a path forward. It is really difficult and sometimes a little scary to see new positions that you don't totally understand and exactly how they're going to work. And there is a certain amount of trust that has to go in making those. And as someone who runs an organization who knows every single tiny thing that's going on, sometimes there's the same desire to want that when I see positions coming forward, but I also know that that's impossible. And I know that we're in a time right now where things are changing quickly, adaptations are having to be made. And a lot of these conversations, especially the one about the mental health coordinator at the library, are conversations that have been going on for a really long time. I remember asking Jessica about this when she was first hired, and the previous director about the position as well. And so I know that not all of these, they're coming to us very, what seems quickly, but my understanding and the conversations that I've had is that they've been being considered for a long period of time, and now seems like the right time to do it. My fear is that when we have high rates of vacancies, and when we see high rates of vacancies all across the country, and people moving and leaving their jobs in other areas, that if we don't intentionally create positions or fill gaps to provide support, that will continue to have more vacancies. And that's something that I don't believe the city can afford to do right now. I feel comfortable with these positions because I do believe that investing in these positions are investments in the city as a whole and as the team as a whole, and hopefully helping us address the other vacancies that exist and preventing more from happening. So I agree that more conversations need to be had. I especially am looking forward to a conversation about that mental health coordinator, because I'm not convinced that there shouldn't be 2 more positions similar at other branches of the library in the future. But it would be nice to make sure that we know the impact that that position has so that we can consider those very, very thoughtfully.
Madam Mayor, if I can maybe clarify what I said a moment ago, the concern is not that that I'm worried about problems here and therefore want to jam this up. I'm very aware of the year-end pressures that we're under. I'm very aware, as I've tried my best to dig into these, why we're doing them, and they make sense. It's just a broader observation that this type of process puts me in a bind. I appreciate the council president's proposed solution with a follow-up meeting. That'll be very helpful to me. That's not the way we can do business as a matter of course. That is asking us to vote and then telling us why we voted later. It's not the right way to do it. So in this instance, good, yes, I like it. But I'm gonna need more context and more help so that I can understand these types of big changes properly as we continue to do business.
Madam Mayor.
And then we're going to move into end of year, I think, right?
Yeah, I just want to, I support all these positions, but in particular, I want to speak to the project management. I think over the last 12 years I've served, I haven't seen the city more complex than it is today. I haven't seen more projects that require attention than I have today. And it's not that we were a Willy Wonka factory 12 years ago, but it certainly has grown in complexity and need, and the exponential growth within our city is speaking volumes to the amount that we must accomplish and must do going forward. We've grown up tremendously in the last 12 years. And I just say 12 because it's how long I've focused heavily on the city of Boise, but it's nowhere comparable to where it was when I began. And I think that having positions that can really hone in on the amount of work that needs to be done is an increasingly important need. And so I do see the need for these positions when I speak to it in that context. Thank you.
Madam Mayor. I agree with my colleague. When I look at these positions, all I see is refinement and a way to do the work on behalf of the people better. So I am fully in support of these changes. And I agree with Councilman Halliburton. I think if we don't provide the support for our current staff, we are going to see more people leaving. They are overtaxed. So much is expected of them. The discussion of the mental health coordinator. What did we do? It's like we swarmed, like, can this person go there? Can we have them deal with this? I mean, to me, that's a perfect example. It's like, these are things that we need. These are people that we need. We absolutely should be asking questions about what they're going to be bringing to the organization. But overall, when I look at this, I see us trying to do our work better and providing the support that our current staff needs to keep pace with our growing city. So I am in support of these changes.
Right, go ahead.
Eric, if you could go to the, are you going to go through the end of year recommendations as well? Quickly. Thanks.
Sure. I will go quickly. I just had two more adjustments that were included in the packet. One was a technical adjustment for the way that we account for our police tasers. There's no cost impact associated with that. It's moving it from our capital budget to our operating budget. The other item before going into end of year was a geothermal project for upgrades at 9th and Bannock, utilizing $250,000 from the operating contingency, which was a subset of that portfolio funding that was approved by the city council as part of the fiscal year 22 budget, as well as a contribution from CCDC.
Madam Mayor, I just have one quick question. I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding the police tasers right. Is that basically taking us from a capital purchase into a subscription on equipment and support?
Councilmember, that is essentially correct.
Okay, great. That was my only question. You don't even have to come up, Chief Lee. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure
Council members.
Thank you, Eric. So I'm really excited to see these end of the year recommendations. I've got a question whether we should hold these for this afternoon or not. So when the mayor gets back, we'll and just do 1 through 9 now. I don't know what's appropriate.
Yeah, thanks for that suggestion, Council President. I was just letting Courtney know that I thought that we could, I don't know if we have to amend the agenda, or if we can just carry this over, but we can do end of year under special business.
Madam Mayor, I just want to add, I have 0 questions about any of the rest of this. So if that's part of the consideration, I think we're good to go.
Oh, then we're good to go. So why don't we stand for questions on end of year?
Okay, if we're good with that, yeah.
Any questions on end of year? Yeah, you have one,
Okay.
right?
No.
Oh, you don't? All right.
No, I don't.
Okay. We're good on end of year. Thank you, Eric.
Okay.
Thank you, Courtney.
So Madam Mayor, with that, I would like to make a motion that we adopt the interim budget changes, year-end changes as presented with the direction to have staff bring back to us on January 11th detail on the questions that arose this morning, so that we can have a discussion about how to carry out the approvals that we'll be doing today.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Discussion? Clerk, will you call the roll?
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Eric.
Madam Mayor, if I
Yes.
could just ask council members, if you want to send me those questions and you can help me not guess what the follow-up is. So like any topics that you want me to bring to you on the 11th would be helpful if you could just let me know. So I know what we're looking for to make the 11th successful. I would appreciate it. And now, Madam Mayor, we have a follow-up on language access. This has been in the works, and staff has been working with your direction and the support of council to explore a more formalized approach to language access for non-native English speakers, as well as residents who have hearing and/or vision impairments. This is based on the language access policy you adopted in February 2021. And what we're looking for today is for you to affirm the next steps based off the recommendations of staff that were informed by a consultant that helped us through this process. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sierra and Lana.
Madam Mayor and council members, good morning. That's the first time I've ever said that, so I feel really cool right now. My name is Sierra Garachana. I am the city's Community Accessibility Manager in CE. Prior to joining the CE team, I oversaw the city's language access program down in HR. Today, Lana and I will be giving an update regarding the program's history, what we've learned, and where we would like to take next steps. In previous years, language access at the city was considered more of a legal necessity and had minimal organizational support. However, in looking ahead, this organization recognizes the need to align language access as part of being a city for everyone, where all members of our community resources have equitable access to resources and information. So before diving in to our current works, I'd like to share some background of our journey so far. Before our roles were created, language access resources were sparse for staff. Staff awareness of our base legal obligations to provide interpretation was mostly unknown, and services were not proactively provided. In early 2018, the Title VI position was created for which I was hired. A little backstory on that. Title VI is the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which speaks to removing barriers that prevent minority, low-income, or limited English proficient individuals from participating in city services and activities. So part of that role, I was also combined as the ADA coordinator as well as an employee relations specialist role. So I functioned as all three, which kind of hints back at the legal obligation to things. In 2019, I was able to update our citywide language access plan, also create high-level department-specific plans, and excuse me, to reflect the interaction and services by department, bring some awareness, and establish base protocols for staff. In 2019, I also set out to compile resources for our staff to be equipped to provide interpretation and translation services. It became clear that utilizing our partners in BPD, who were already sourcing local interpreters and translators, was our best choice. Staff citywide are now able to tap into these interpreters for document translation as well as spoken interpretation. These interpreters are integral and trusted members of our own community. Our refugee liaisons in BPD continue to source more interpreters and expand our resources for additional languages. For quick walk-up interactions, I also established citywide use of language line solutions. They are a 365, 24/7 over-the-phone service for interpretation. Our clerk's office and utility billing use them often. As you might have guessed or even seen, services are currently being provided at varying degrees across the organization, resulting in fragmented processes and different experiences across the city, depending on the department. Building upon what I was able to accomplish, we have an opportunity to shift to a more meaningful approach that is connected and consistent citywide. To capitalize on this opportunity, a budget priority was set in FY21 to explore building a formalized language access program. Our work done to date includes the adoption of the language access policy earlier this year to highlight the importance of the work and align our organization. Our most recent work includes hiring a consultant, Andean Consulting Solutions, to conduct a needs assessment across city departments and engage our community to help us formalize our language access program. The core team supporting this work included Maria, Lana, and myself. The ACSI team reviewed my existing work, which included language access plans, staff surveys, and initial work regarding translation of vital documents. They also collected data on who makes up our Boise, conducted multiple interviews, and facilitated a focus group. Their work culminated in a final report delivered to the city in October. We felt that outreach and engagement was vital in the success of this work. Our core team was able to connect the ACSI team with community leaders working with immigrant and refugee residents, as well as members of those communities to better understand needs and opportunities. One-on-one interviews were conducted with 5 city staff, 2 council members, and 3 community members. 20 staff members, including department directors and frontline staff, were surveyed. And 8 community stakeholders and city staff comprised the focus group. A piece of data from the ACSI's final report indicated that 6.4% of Boise's population is foreign-born. The largest shares of Boise's foreign-born population from a single country were born in Mexico, China, Iraq, India, Germany, Canada, Philippines, Laos, Eastern African countries, and Vietnam. Taking a look into the languages spoken by our foreign-born population, of the 10.1% of our community who speak a language other than English at home, 6.6 speak English very well, while 3.4 speak English less than very well. Of the 7,305 limited English-speaking people, 42% speak Spanish and 58 speak other languages. The ACSI team pulled data from 3 sources to determine our top languages most requested by our community members. In the data from our on-call services, which is our over-the-phone interpretation service, Spanish and Swahili were most requested. In interviewing and surveying city staff this year, Spanish and Swahili were also most requested. This changed from the data I collected in 2018 from staff, which indicated Spanish and Bosnian as the most requested languages. So all 3 data sources are showing us that Spanish continues to be our most requested and encountered language. I'll switch things over to Lana to talk about our current stage in this work and next steps.
Not as tall.
Here, thank you.
Thanks, Sierra, and thanks, Madam Mayor and Council, for having us here to be able to share the next steps in the language access program. So I just want to take a quick step back and share why we chose to go with ACSI. They have a proprietary language access maturity model that we thought fit really well with where we were looking to go as an organization. The model allows us to look at our culture, infrastructure, and the current resources, and then help develop a comprehensive framework to take us to the next level. So that's one of the main reasons we went with ACSI. And as Sierra shared, they did do interviews conducted, which showed us that we're at the ad hoc level. And that means that we do offer language access services, but really on request. So that could mean anything from somebody requesting language access at a department, but their experience could be very different. We just don't have the framework right now to have a plan organization-wide, which is really what we're looking to get at. So based on the assessment and the recommendations outlined in the report, we plan to follow these key recommendations that I'll speak to a little bit more to strengthen the mandate by including the full scope of language access requirements and compliance goals across the organization. So that will start with the recruitment and onboarding of a language access manager who will really own this body of work. And then we'll formalize how and what we translate, including signage. Some pretty quick things we can do is have I speak cards for folks who are coming into our different facilities to be able to quickly identify the language that they prefer to speak in, and we can serve them in. We'll update website content and documents and ensure that each is done with cultural competence. We will coordinate on technical assistance to establish key roles and departments for centralized coordination. So this means that we'll work with each department to identify dedicated language access coordinator. So this will take the work of the language access manager, where the work will be centralized, and really have tentacles throughout the organization. There will be a language access coordinator that will work with department directors to help us identify, that'll meet pretty regularly with the language access manager to ensure there's compliance, that there's the processes are streamlined. And then quality and oversight is to strengthen accountability. So we'll develop formalized reporting tools and performance metrics and deliver an annual performance report to make sure that we're staying on track. And then we'll also look to explore additional resources. For example, if on-camera video conferencing proves to be helpful, that's a tool we'll explore as well. And then ongoing compliance and cultural competence training will incorporate language access training into new hire orientation and ensure frontline staff receive cultural competence training. This is something we are hoping to do in partnership with HR. We know that this isn't something that can just live within one person in the language access manager, but really needs to permeate throughout the organization. And to that end, we'll look to hire and retain bilingual staff. That was one of the main recommendations that ACSI had for us. So we will share the report and recommendations for hiring and retaining bilingual staff with HR, again, to ensure that we're incorporating best practices throughout the organization.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Thank you, Lana. So that part about the hiring and retaining bilingual staff, I know there are some states that pay a pay differential for folks who have that ability. I don't think we do that in Idaho, but is there going to be an attempt to perhaps offer that as part of this? I know that, being a bilingual person myself, I remember when I was the only bilingual civil rights investigator with the Human Rights Commission, and I was paid a whopping 10 cents extra for that, could finally buy that gallon of milk I had my eye on. So it's just not something that's appreciated in terms of salary from what I've experienced in Idaho. So I'm just wondering if that'll be part of the conversation as well.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Sanchez, yes, that is something that was included in the report, and there's different recommendations. So our hope is to share the report with HR and make sure that as we're hiring and retaining staff, that's a consideration. Make sure I know where I'm at. Oh, there we go. Okay. So next we'll provide on-call and interpretation services that already exist, but really strengthening that practice and ensuring that that's information that is available across the city, that those services are available. And then translate and share out vital documents. So we really worked closely with ACSI to help us determine how do we and what do we consider to be vital documents, and really landed on using the 4-factor analysis. So determining the number of limited English proficient residents who would be served by the information, then identifying documents and written materials in any format that each department uses to serve and communicate with residents. Determine the frequency of use and importance of the documents the public needs access to. I think COVID has proven to be a good example of that, making sure that information on any public health updates is available in all languages. And we've worked really closely with our resettlement agencies throughout the last couple of years to translate and offer those documents, but to really strengthen that. And then to look at the cost of translation for the documents. So where we've landed, and I'll go in a little more detail in just a little bit, is to start with at least having at least 3 vital documents translated into Spanish, and 1 vital document into the following top 3 languages that we
Madam Mayor,
shared.
just another question. Lana, we were just having a conversation, me and my bilingual Spanish-speaking friends. One of my other hats that I wear is I do voiceover work for local production companies, and sometimes when we get scripts, it's very clear that they have hired somebody to translate the document, and it's not the type of Spanish that folks from the Mexican community would speak. And since your data has shown that a good number of our folks who are not from the US, a large number of them come from Mexico. Are we taking steps to ensure that it's that particular dialect that we're using when we're hiring translators to translate at least Spanish? I can't speak to the other language, but that has been my experience doing voiceover work for the past 20 years in Idaho. Is sometimes I have to readjust the script, which I don't get paid for. So.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Sanchez, yes, absolutely. And I think that that's been proven to be a successful model as well. As I mentioned, we've been working with our resettlement agencies on getting COVID information translated. There's some words that just don't exist in some languages. So working really closely with native speakers to ensure that we're providing information in the way and that makes sense in their languages is really important.
Lana, one other thing I might add, and I don't know if that's going to be part of the information that the agency provided, but I'm also wondering the education level of folks, because as we know, there are highly technical words that are involved in some of these documents that are just, they might as well be in a completely other language just because the level of reading is different. So I'm wondering if that'll be a part of this as well.
And I think, yes, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Sanchez, yes, that will be a part of it. I think the other consideration here, and I can talk about this for a long time, so thank you for asking these questions, is how we deliver the information, right? We know that in some of our community groups, they use WhatsApp, and translating something into a physical document isn't going to have the same impact and isn't going to be able to be received the same way. So those are all things that we're going to be looking into. And then the last consideration or key recommendation, excuse me, is community outreach and engagement. And I think this is what we've been talking to is we can have all of these really great resources, but if our community doesn't know about them, that's we're doing ourselves and the residents a disservice. So we're going to be placing a lot of effort into engaging the community and outreach and education to ensure that the residents who would benefit from language access services note that they're available, know how to find them and access them. And then one of the things, for example, that we can do pretty quickly is look into multilingual signage. So when folks come in, they know where to go and they know how to access resources. So I'll go through a pretty, sorry, I'm getting my stuff organized here. Pretty high level timeline, or I'm sorry, an in-depth timeline, and then a high level timeline because there's a lot of information here. And I want to make sure we have time for questions. So in phase one, we'll be looking to share the needs assessment that the consultants have provided with the executive management team to set expectations for things like identifying a language access coordinator within their department who can dedicate the time to ensure that we're doing this the right way and it's streamlined. We'll finalize recruitment and onboarding of the language access manager. We'll update the language access regulation from February to incorporate some of the recommendations from this report. We'll work with directors to identify language access liaisons, print I speak cards, share out interpretation and translation quick guide, which already exists citywide, and then begin translation of vital documents. In phase two, we'll move into having the language access manager develop a reporting framework and provide training to the language access liaisons throughout the organization. We'll develop a language access toolkit and best practices for the organization to be able to access. And we'll work on community outreach and education. We're thinking things like including a Know Your Language Access Rights training. And then we'll also offer top 6 vital documents in all departments to be translated into Spanish, and top 2 vital documents will be available in the following 3 languages. And then looking to, oh gosh, sorry, I'm not keeping up. Looking to phase 3, we'll deepen the language access compliance by working on citywide projects that advance language access implementation, like the hiring and retaining bilingual staff plans, organization-wide compliance training. And then by that time, we'll have the top 9 vital documents in all departments available in Spanish, and then the top 4 documents available in the next 3 languages. So a more condensed version for next steps is we'll hire a language access manager. Recruitment is already underway. And we hope to onboard somebody in early 2022. Knowing that Spanish is the top language, our goal and intention is to hire a native Spanish speaker for both the language and the cultural competence that we've discussed. Mayor and council, you will receive a mid-year update from the language access manager on progress and recommendations for next steps. And that'll be it.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Thank you, Lana. So those documents that each department is going to offer up for translation, do you know how those are being identified?
Yes, so it's the 4-factor identification. So how many residents will they serve? What is the importance of them? How often are they being requested? Things like that will be taken into consideration.
Madam Mayor, thanks. Thanks for the presentation. One of the things I didn't hear, and you're probably working on it, you just didn't add it to this, is how we're working with partner agencies that also work with many of these folks with different language barriers, just so that to the extent we can, we're coordinating, making it easier for them to access across the different organizations instead of harder.
Sure. So they were included in the interviews, surveys, and focus groups to make sure that we got that the consultants had a very clear understanding of the work that they do with the residents that they serve who are non-native English speakers, and we included non-native English speakers in those processes as well. And then in the community partnerships position, that role is really focused also on building those relationships. And in my role, I work really closely with some of the community members and resettlement agencies. So there's that two-way communication.
Madam Mayor, no questions. I just wanted to say great work. I know this has been a long time coming and you guys have been working on it for a while now. It's great to see the culmination of it and I look forward to the next steps.
Thank you.
Great to see you, Alana. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, Jimmy, did you have something? No. Okay.
Madam Mayor, council members, now I have the Seeing Clean City Index that Steve Hubble is going to present. A Clean City Index identifies city-wide baseline data for environmental equity and public health factors. And we have developed this tool, and what we're looking for your input on is just general thoughts on how best to apply it. Fair warning, it is, I think, human tendency when we present data to request more data. And I urge you to think about the use of the data we currently have before we acquire more. It's really exciting. I think it allows for a lot of opportunity to do targeted investments in parts of the city who could really use the support. And with that, I'll turn it over to Steve.
Thank you, Courtney. Mayor, council members, good morning. Nice to see you all today. Just a quick outline. I'll start with sharing some background on the development of the Clean City Index, and then share some initial thoughts on how we might utilize this tool in our work going forward. So earlier this year, my team, the Climate Action Division, was tasked with developing the Clean City Index, and we completed the analysis earlier this fall. The purpose of the index was to develop a citywide baseline of data for environmental, health, and equity considerations. As the project commenced, we identified existing resources, including the Community Development Analysis, which was developed in 2019 by Housing and Community Development in Planning and Development Services. This work provided a starting point for the Clean City Index. Additionally, we reviewed similar work from other cities, and most notably the graphic I included here, a climate equity index, which was developed for the city of San Diego, California. The previously developed Community Development Analysis focused primarily on health and housing. So it was necessary to identify additional data sources related to the environment and equity. To identify the additional data, we reviewed national sources like the American Community Survey from the US Census and the Environmental Justice or EJ Screen tool from the US Environmental Protection Agency, as well as other local and regional data sources. An important decision in the process was determining the appropriate geographic scale for the index. Matching the prior work in the community development analysis, the examples reviewed from other cities, and the scale of available data, we found that data at the census tract level to be the most appropriate. For reference, Boise has a total of 49 full or partial census tracts that cover the city. Once that was completed, a broad range of potential data indicators and metrics at that scale were identified and evaluated. The data indicators and metrics were finalized after eliminating those that were not statistically appropriate or those that did not offer significant value to the index. So this slide shows the results of the completed analysis. The final index includes 5 environmental indicators and 7 equity and health indicators. The final environmental indicators, which are shown in the chart on the right, are air quality, water, land, waste, and natural hazards. And then an example of the selected metrics or specific data points associated with those indicators include, for example, flood risk, fire risk, and proximity to hazardous materials sites. The final equity and health indicators include demographics, education, health, housing, equity, energy, and transportation. Within those 7 indicators, 23 individual data metrics were selected. Examples of the selected equity and health metrics include overall health status, access to public transit, and household energy burden. All of the 34 metrics were then compiled by census tract, quantified with equal weighting, and then ranked into quartiles for prioritization. The results of the prioritization were used to create the map that you see here, which shows the census tracts ranked by priority from high to low. The higher priority areas are shown in the darker shades of blue, and the lower priority areas are shown in the lighter blue to green color. It's important to emphasize that this map represents the results of the specific quantitative data analysis that was completed with this project. It should not be interpreted as a qualitative comparison between different areas of the city. The index does identify that there are opportunities within the city to address environmental justice, health, and equity challenges. As we see current and anticipated future impacts from climate change, addressing these challenges provides an opportunity to improve community resilience. The identification of priority areas in the index provides an opportunity to integrate additional considerations around environmental justice, health, and equity into city project and resource prioritization. The index provides additional data and a supplemental tool to support decision-making. It has the potential to help prioritize our community climate action work, but also to be incorporated into a broader range of decision-making processes for other city programs. This slide presents an initial outline of how we'll begin to consider implementing the index and integrating it into our work. First, we'll take stock and an inventory of existing city programs and partnership that align with some of the data in the index. Once those are identified, we'll look to determine a prioritization approach and present options for feedback. Another important aspect of the work will be to reach out to stakeholders in collaboration, particularly within the priority areas, to better understand their perspective on the opportunities and challenges that they see. And then last but not least, we'll need to assign roles and responsibilities within the organization or partner organizations to ensure that the work is completed. We'll plan to develop all of that into a more detailed action plan to build out our next steps and review those findings with City Council when that's ready. And then for the last slide, I just wanted to close here with some examples of how this might impact implementation of particular programs. So the first one I'll mention is the City of Trees Challenge. And with that program, they've already had an opportunity to use the Clean City Index. And that specifically was used to identify areas of the city that lack tree canopy for the planting prioritization that was done in the Bora and Liberty Park neighborhoods. For climate action, the index identifies areas where household energy burden is high. So this provides an opportunity potentially to target our energy efficiency program work, either independent by the city or in partnership with our utilities to those areas and help reduce that cost burden for those residents that need it the most. And last but not least, utility affordability. So speaking specifically about the city utilities, so our water renewal or sewer utility and our trash or materials management utility, could the locations identified in the index provide an opportunity to pilot some affordability programs within those areas? This is just an example. There's numerous other options, but just wanted to provide a couple things that were tangible to give you a feel for the thought process so far. And that concludes the slides. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you all have.
Madam Mayor.
Go ahead.
A couple of questions, Steve. First, this is a great tool, and I can't imagine anything other than it was a tremendous amount of work. So thank you. Kind of at a high level, the purpose of this kind of tool, among other purposes, is to identify and capture negative externalities, right? Like we have a city design that has caused an economic inefficiency such that people over here have lower incomes, or we have a traffic design such that people over here suffer more in inversions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It sounds like there's a pretty broad tool here with enough inputs that it's also pretty subtle. I'm just throwing this out there in the implementation phase as you're working into that. I would love to be able to consider this as a factor in land use planning decisions. Many of the things that you've identified go to the things that LUPA asks us to look at or that Blueprint Boise asks us to look at. But to the extent this is an objective, quantifiable way to measure some of those externalities, I would love to see it tied in as an explicit factor that we can think about when evaluating, for example, reducing parking minimums, or when evaluating the type of density we want and where. It's just another thing for us to lean on in our authority to regulate for the health and welfare. This looks like exactly the kind of tool that would be really helpful for us to build a better city.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Bajent, really appreciate that feedback. I think we've really just started to scratch the surface potentially as how we could use that. And we've been working internally over the last couple of months to connect the work that we've done with other departments across the city. I think there's a lot of opportunity to align it with other work, maybe specific to planning and development services. I know last week you all saw a presentation on the neighborhood almanac, and I think this would align really well or integrate into that someday, depending on how those processes move forward. So I think stay tuned for additional thoughts in response to your comment.
Madam Mayor, I started by commenting on how much work this was, and I didn't mean to imply that you should go do more work, but I just see like a real opportunity here, and I'm excited about it.
Madam Mayor, Patrick took my comments, Steve, and then you followed up with the neighborhood almanac comment. So I really don't have any more comments, but I think that this has been something that if anyone ever listens to what I say, I know that we have had this ability with the new census tract data that we are now big enough to have. And I'm just so thrilled to actually have this in a way that we'll be able to start to implement it on our land use planning decisions. And as we're looking at how we share resources throughout our city in ways that really impact people in a positive way. So thank you for your work. I think it's pretty awesome. And just to kind of follow on the examples of implementation, those are really fantastic examples. Some other folks that I think could be interested in this information are our healthcare systems, especially on the health piece of that and looking at different neighborhoods and how they fare as far as health outcomes for residents. So great work, Steve. Thank you so much.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Woodings, thank you for your thoughts there. I think, again, there's a lot of potential for use application. It paints a really broad picture. No one specific is really driving the whole outcome that you saw there. But I think there's an opportunity for areas of interest like health for folks that are particularly interested in that to take a deeper dive and really hone in on areas of the city where that might be a challenge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you so much for that presentation. I have a quick question about one of your slides. I think it starts, some areas of our community face greater challenges with environmental justice, health, and equity. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I would actually back up to the slide before and point to the results of the analysis, which were produced in the map here. So when we took all of the specific data that was collected, analyzed, normalized it, and then presented it spatially in this map form, the areas that you see in blue, at least for the inputs that went into this model, were those that came in an output to say if there are potential areas of focus to make improvements in those areas, that these high to medium high priorities, so that the tracks that you see in the dark blue and then the medium blue, if you will, would be the areas to focus.
Okay, I guess I'm looking for regular people language for folks who might be reviewing this later. When we talk about environmental justice, health and equity, what are we talking about? What are examples?
So the examples of the data that we looked at to see there are those that are shown on the slide. So with environmental factors, so we're thinking about flood risk. So if you break that down, what we did is we looked at the potential for flood risk all across the city, and then we mapped each census tract to determine which had the highest potential for flood risk. So to give a tangible example, those would likely be areas that are nearest to the Boise River in our community. And then you repeat that process for all of the other 33 indicators that were presented. And then you take that and put that together to produce the map that's applied here.
So do the people who would live in an area like that, would they tend to be higher income or lower income?
Madam Mayor, Council Member Sanchez. So I don't think there's a specific way to answer that question, but I can say that income was one of the 34 metrics that was included. So it is part of the analysis that produced these results, but one of 34 factors. So it's a consideration, but not a primary consideration.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Madam Mayor, quick question there, and it's kind of related to what Councilmember Sanchez was bringing up. I mean, one of the things that I noticed when we look at some of the darker blue areas is that they tend to be along busier road corridors that might be closer to traffic and emissions and hazards and stuff that are presented there. That's one of those types of data points, right? That in some of our lower income neighborhoods that are closer to busier roads, we see higher cases of asthma and pollution and emissions. That's all part of the different factors that we're examining. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, Council Member Halliburton, correct. There is an air quality consideration, as you see here, and then there's actually 4 transportation data points that tie into some of those items that you mentioned. So I think that's a fair conclusion to draw.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate that. And I bring that up because that's one of the easiest ones for me to see in the world that I work in when I look at inequalities as far as where people live in those types of environments. So I don't know if that's helpful or not as far as some normal people language. At least it's normal in the transportation world for me.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Madam Mayor, council members, I will offer a follow-up because I needed it. It's really challenging to represent this sophisticated tool that's an interactive map in a flat PowerPoint in front of council. So I'm sure I can volunteer Steve to sit down and like navigate through this in real time, because I was interested in is if you remove one of the inputs, what happens? How is it weighted? Where actually are we looking at and which communities are we looking at? Steve did it with me and then kindly sent me the link, and I got super overwhelmed and couldn't figure out how to use it. So I'm sure we can get you the link if you would like Steve's help in navigating this complicated tool. I'm sure we can make that happen as well.
Madam Mayor. I think for me, it's when we have words like social justice, those can be triggering for folks. And if we don't give some detail behind that, people will fill that in with their own story. And so I think it's important that we, I'm all about social justice, but for those folks who aren't as familiar with that term, I don't think they would fully appreciate what you're talking about here. So I guess that's what I would like to see a little more behind that, to flesh that out a little bit for folks.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Sanchez, appreciate that comment. I think this tool, while really powerful in and of itself, does bring up some communication challenges. And we're certainly working on that with our CE team to make sure we put the best foot forward as this gets more broadly shared out into the community.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Steve, I had the opportunity to watch as this tool was used, maybe, for the first time in real time by a city group on the City of Trees Challenge. And first of all, kudos to everyone who worked on it for developing this really robust data set that they were able to use in a way, as I understand it, that no other city, at least to date, had used in determining, how to target their tree planting efforts based on equity and based on some of these other metrics. I think Councilmember Bajent's comment about how can we use it in our development applications to give us better information as we make development decisions is another example. It seems to me that maybe the biggest challenge now that we have this really robust set of data is understanding what priorities we're going to set to use it for and how we're going to do that. I think as Courtney pointed out, you can go in and choose any focus and come up with a different answer than if you chose another focus. And so I guess I'm looking forward over the next bit to understand how we're going to have conversations at the policy level about how to use it and how to use it to prioritize our actions, how to use it to give us better information as we make decisions. And I don't pretend to have the answer to that. I just know that it's capable of so much that it would, I'm guessing, be helpful to staff, certainly be helpful to me to have those discussions and really develop direction about at least top line how to use it. Doesn't mean that if a staff member or a certain initiative comes along and says, wait a minute, we can use it this way, we wouldn't do it. But really dig in and prioritize based on our strategic plan, based on our blueprint, based on the data, where we want to start. Does that make some sense?
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg, it does. And I think the way I think about the tool, and hopefully others will, is that it's probably not a one size fits all. It's a supplement to the other decision-making tools that are already embedded in various programs across the city. And I'm hopeful it'll be one that's beneficial, but I think the use case is going to vary depending on the nature of work. So I think we'll have good opportunity to continue to work that out and then come back with some recommendations and get your input on more specifics.
Great. And of course, that's notwithstanding the direct actions that are in the climate action plan that you're going to use this based on. But I think there's just so many other ways that we can utilize the information that has come out of it.
Yeah, Mayor, Council Member Clegg, agree with that point. Definitely. There are some, as we presented in the actions, there's some clear things that we know to move forward that this definitely supports. And I think one thing that's been helpful as well is as we look to other cities for guidance in developing the tool, we're also seeing some of them move into an implementation phase with the work that they've done. So we can learn some lessons there potentially to apply to our work as well.
Thank you.
All right, looks like there are no further comments. Steve, is this yeah, this is it, right? I just want to say I appreciate the presentation. And as we move into a conversation also about housing, it's looking at tools like this, how we use it for different policy decisions, but it highlights really the codependency and integration of all the issues that we care about. It's not just climate, it's affordability, it's health. And that is why we are encouraging in the city as we deliver on these more complex problems to recognize that they're more complex. We don't want to keep projects siloed, and we want to use tools like this to guide that and then encourage staff to think across those silos as they're providing solutions to the city. And housing's another, just Courtney will have some things I think to say too, but housing's another one of those places where when we seek to keep people housed, ensure that we have the right number of units at Boise budgets in the community, and that we convene the right partners using the land that we have most strategically, that we really look across sectors to deliver more quickly than the city has historically, as well as more effectively.
Madam Mayor, before Maureen gets started, I just want to acknowledge that the housing team has been working tirelessly. We have expanded the team. We have added new staff. They have been working behind the scenes to get the pieces and parts in place to start accelerating what the city can do in the housing space. A lot of that has been behind the scenes. Today, I'm hopeful Maureen will bring to you what we have underway and where we're headed in the housing space so that you get the clarity you're looking for in terms of what are we doing and what we plan on doing, and getting your feedback associated with that. So Maureen.
Thank you, Courtney. Mayor and Council, thanks for having me this morning. As Courtney mentioned, I am here to provide an update on our housing goals, the strategies to meet those goals, and our progress to date. I tried to keep this presentation pretty high level. So if there are specific project level questions that I don't have the details front of mind, I'm happy to come back with a written update. And then my colleagues from Public Works are here as well if there's some specific questions for added brain power, because there's certainly a lot underway and a lot to keep track of. I wanted to begin with a quick year in review, if you will, a quick review of some of our accomplishments in 2021. As Courtney mentioned, with your support, we added capacity to our housing team to include 4 brand new positions. And then additionally, more than half of our team is in new to them positions as we filled vacancies and realigned our staffing to better complete the work before us. So the work then that our team has accomplished over the last year includes what you see before you on the slide. We've completed housing and homelessness needs analyses. We've set goals that are data informed. We've made plans to achieve those goals, and we've done this while also serving our residents by providing emergency rental assistance or by housing them directly through our city rental housing. In August, the last time that our team was before mayor and council, we presented the housing needs analysis. That analysis demonstrated that over 2,700 more homes are needed each year for the next 10 years. And most of these homes need to be deeply affordable. They need to be affordable at rates for our residents that are earning only 60% of the median income in our area or even less. So that means that they need to be designed and affordable to our lowest earning households within the city. In that same presentation, we laid out some stretch goals, so challenging but achievable goals, especially with a commitment from city leadership related to creating affordable housing, preserving affordable housing, and housing those residents in our city that do not currently have homes. Today's presentation is going to focus on the number of homes the city wants to create. At a later date, we'll come back to council to talk more specifically about housing preservation efforts, and then also to continue discussions around homelessness and the strategies and plans we have before us in partnership with our Path Home. Today, though, we are focused on the 1,500 units of housing you see circled here in red, and building the multifamily apartments we need to for our residents that need a safe and stable place to call home. These are our residents who are really living the headlines that we've all read about, not just in the local news, but more recently and maybe even more often in the national news about the cost of housing in Boise and about Boise being one of the least affordable communities in the nation. We know our residents, the ones that live, work, and play here, need the city's leadership in this space. Again, our overall goal is to create or produce at least 1,500 homes by September 30th, 2026. This means that we will create the homes that our residents are not finding in housing listings advertised today. These are the residents that need the city to step in. If you are a household in this category, you're likely earning somewhere in the range of $30,000 to $45,000 a year or below as a household. That number might go up, that household income might go up if your household is large or very large. This means that we're talking about the workforce that keeps our city running. We're talking about wait staff and cashiers. We're talking about teaching assistants and daycare providers that care for our kids while we're at work. We're talking about the vet techs that take care of the pets we love, the certified nursing assistants that do the prep work before we see the doctor. These are our graduate students at Boise State. These are folks working really hard in minimum wage jobs or on disability. These are the households and the type of jobs that they hold that are struggling to afford to live in Boise. Right now, without assistance, without the city's assistance, the housing that's being built is market rate and it's too expensive. The city needs to take a lead role to make sure that affordable housing is also being built. And this next slide really shows what we're setting out to do. Again, since we were here at the end of August, and Courtney alluded to this in her opening comments, the work our team has undertaken has included some significant heavy lifting behind the scenes. This work has been led by Anna Drennan. You met her in August. She's our new housing manager, joined our team in July, and also Deanna Dupuy, who joined our team in her new position over the summer. Together, they have put the infrastructure that we need in place to make our housing goals actionable. We have created a development pipeline full of multifamily projects to create new homes, and we've enhanced how the city can invest, how the city can provide the tools and framework necessary to create these new homes and to make these projects, come to life in neighborhoods across the city. The take home on this slide for you all, what's important for you to know and for our residents who are struggling right now to know is that given this work, we are on track to meet our goals to create new housing. We continue to look for opportunities to acquire land via the city's land trust, and also are beginning to prepare, as the mayor stated, our city-owned parcels for housing. We are committing the funds these housing projects need, the dollars they need to make sure they have the resources to get built and be made available to rent for residents that need affordable housing. And then we're also, and this is critical, and again, the excuse me, again, the mayor mentioned it, we're also partnering to make sure the city is not the only problem solver at the table. If we are bringing funds to the table, who else are we partnering with in order to bring additional units online? Right now, we have 14 city-led projects, and that includes 1,162 new homes that are underway, all while we continue to scan for where else the city can have a seat at the table, what other projects might be shovel-ready that we can partner on to help bring our residents the housing they need and to do so as fast as we can.
Madam Mayor, Maureen, I just have a question about that figure. What I think it was 1,162 homes. Does that include like the development on Franklin and Orchard, and then also density bonuses and stuff like that? What all is included in that figure?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Woodings, in the next two slides, I'm going to show you exactly which projects we're counting towards those 1,162 homes. But yes, it does include Moda Franklin, and it will include any projects for which the city is making an investment using one of the tools available to us, including the housing bonus ordinance.
Okay, sorry, I jumped the gun on that one.
I'm getting there. So if we pivot for just a moment to the housing pipeline I referenced, this is the process to develop housing. I'm not going to read the slide to you, but I want to say that this process is important because, of course, we want to move with urgency, but we also want to move with a holistic approach, considering things like the Clean City Index that Steve just presented, to ensure that the housing the city helps create enhances neighborhood livability and delivers to residents what it is that they are asking for and what it is that they need, and really what an overwhelming amount of data and daily news stories is telling us that the city is going through. So Moda Franklin went through a process not unlike this one. We refined the process. State and Arthur is going through it currently. We have these as examples, these projects as examples to implement, measure, and learn from, and then to streamline our efforts across city departments and to include other strategic initiatives. So these first three phases: spot the opportunity, frame the project, package the opportunity, do take some time, but the time spent on this front end better positions the city to deliver the housing our residents need in a way that moves the subsequent stages faster. The first three phases of this process help us identify feasible locations for housing, help us put those locations into a schedule for completion, help us engage our community, and help us remove barriers to getting the housing built. So Councilmember Woodings, to your point, your question, here is the pipeline as it stands today, populated with the 14 projects that we have underway. On that note, I do want to point out that cities increased activity in the housing space. Specifically, I want to point to the number of increased housing land trust projects, so everything with a star, where the city is actively stepping in, taking on a lead role in bringing relief to residents. This is what the capacity added to our team is enabling. 2 years ago, or even a year ago, we relied much more heavily, if not solely, on housing and urban development, so our federal grant programs, on housing and urban development funded housing projects to increase the number of affordable homes in Boise. And you can see here with a commitment to invest in both staff capacity and funds, the significant shift in impact. This is a slide that I intend to be used if it's useful as a handout. It's probably more useful as a handout than a slide. So you don't need to necessarily try to read the detail on the right, but those are the 14 projects, just a high level summary of what you saw on the previous slide. But the focus more so here is on the map, just to give you an idea of where in the city these projects are underway, where they're planned for. And then the box you see kind of there in the middle is just a call out of the downtown area specifically. Given the 14 projects we have underway, this slide shows you when we believe these apartments will be ready for people to move into. It is possible that this could shift. I hate to overpromise and underdeliver, but they do want to be clear that, especially given some of the federal fund sources available now that can help accelerate the process. And then as we're able to add projects, we will and we intend to be able to increase the number of homes that we can create. And then I also want to take a moment here to remind residents that are struggling with housing today, residents that need relief today, not next year, not the year after, and certainly not in 2025 or can't afford to wait that long. I do want to remind residents that as the city leads in this space to deliver housing to those who need it most, and because I know this got mentioned earlier in the work session, you know, development takes a while, years really. There's increased costs, there's supply chain issues, et cetera, et cetera. But I do want to remind those in need that those today that need help with housing costs, that the city does continue to offer emergency rental assistance and the mortgage assistance program. And we have requested additional funds through the US Treasury to keep that emergency rental assistance program going. Okay, finally, this is my last slide before any questions or discussion, but just one more visual depiction of what's happening now so that you can continue to see what we have before us. Again, this represents the 14 projects that are currently in the pipeline and the phase in which they are in now. Again, it does not reflect any new opportunities that we may be able to pursue or will pursue in the coming months. Our goal is to create 1,500 homes. The projects we have now get us well over halfway there. In just a few short months, we are 77% of the way toward meeting our goal, with the intention of bringing alongside additional projects. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you. So within this number, do we see the preserved homes that you were talking about, Maureen, where we're trying to preserve already affordable housing that exists?
Madam Mayor, Council Pro Tem Sanchez, this presentation and the 1,163 homes included here does not include any of our housing preservation efforts. I do intend, or our team intends, to build out specific strategies and specific programming, if you will, to move towards our goal of creating, or excuse me, of preserving 1,000 homes. But what you see here today really focuses just on those homes that we're looking to create.
Okay, so Maureen, since we're talking about the supply chain issues and the increasing costs in construction, is there a move to encourage that perhaps that is a way to work around that?
Madam Mayor, Council Pro Tem Sanchez, certainly our preservation efforts and strategy are as high of a priority as our efforts to create affordable housing and to house those without homes. Preservation is a little bit trickier given the constraints and given what we know from a data-informed lens about where affordable housing exists and whether, to what extent, the city will be able to preserve it.
Thanks,
so
Maureen.
more to come on that issue.
And just to be clear on that, Maureen, it's additive to these numbers. So when you and your team have determined that these are the goal numbers for creation of homes, there's also a recognition that the preservation of homes is separate from that. So it's additive.
Mayor, that is correct. Thank you.
Madam Mayor. So I appreciate that this is homing in on really getting stuff done, from the first time we saw it. It's becoming more and more clear to me that as much as we're trying to do, it's not enough, and it's not going to be enough. And so we've got to do all of this. I'm not suggesting that we slow down at all, but I think we also need to continue to think about how to bring the other partners along to do the other parts of it, so that we're not left, assuming responsibility for all of it, because we can't do it all, but more importantly, that the people who need housing aren't left without adequate housing.
Sure, I think that's a really good point. And partnership is incredibly important. And so if you'll remember that these are tied mainly to the land that we have. So we want to, as effectively as possible, use assets that we have in our inventory, as well as other places where federal funds that we distribute would incent folks to build. We do need partnership, just completely private, from the city willing also to build homes at Boise budgets. We've called on the state, and the governor is looking at investing in the Housing Trust Fund, but also they've now done an assessment of their assets that could be used more effectively. The partnership we have with CCDC is key. The chairman of CCDC in 2020 said that her goal was to see CCDC move into the affordability space, and they've done that very effectively, and I appreciate that. And then there's the other things that Maureen's come to us and will come to us again when it comes to housing the unhoused. We're looking at Medicaid reimbursement for some of those expenses, other entities and organizations to be partners in that space, as well as a conversation with the business community at large about helping to provide housing for their employees when appropriate. So all of that is happening while we want to maximize the land that we have under inventory too.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I just wanted to offer that comment that you just made. One of the things that came out of the Associated Taxpayers Conference a couple of weeks ago was the willingness and understanding of some of our large employers that they now play in the housing arena as well, particularly from Odette Bolano, the CEO of St. Al's. So I think that offers some really great opportunities to either share our expertise with them now that we've done a couple of these land bank projects, because I know that they're also significant landholders and likely have similar opportunities, but also just recognizing their role and making sure that we're willing partners on that.
Yeah, that's a great point. It did come up there, and St. Al's and Odette in particular have really been leading the business community in the conversation. And I want to give a shout out to our housing team, to housing staff in my office, as well as to Kathy Griesmeyer and Kate Nelson for the conversations and guidance we've had with the business community over the last, I'd say 10 to 12 months about this very topic. And I've also asked staff to do an assessment of what in our ordinances would need to change to allow some employers to do housing on their property if it's not typically zoned for residential, with the tie-in to staff, not specific to any employer that's been referenced today, but to some conversations we've had with others. So really appreciate that the business community understands as the tie-in not only to their ability to hire, but to the economic health of our region in general. As was indicated several years ago by Brookings, and now the business community is a willing and ready partner to address this and to help us encourage other public agencies to partner as well.
Madam Mayor. Maureen, do we know if members of the public, if they know that they too can participate in this process. I think about recently being contacted by NeighborWorks about somebody who wanted to donate their home, like the actual structure, and just move it to a piece of property. And I was really pleased to hear that. I had not heard that before. And, you know, are we letting folks know that if they want to do something like that, that's possible?
Mayor McLean, Council Pro Tim Sanchez, the short answer is yes. Certainly there's some challenges in meeting kind of the wish list, if you will, or maybe meeting some of those opportunities, especially if they're on a smaller scale. But the short answer is that we have a pretty robust network of partners that knows the city has resource and knows that if they want to partner on affordable housing, that we are all ears in terms of resources, ideas, and really leveraging each other's strengths.
Do you have further?
I don't. Thank you very much.
All right. That is, and I just want to make sure that everybody else. Okay. We've covered everything for our session. Thanks, Maureen. And we will be back here at noon.